Welcome, everybody. My name's Josh Eakle. I'm the executive director of For All Tennessee. I want to thank you for coming to the live stream today and taking some of the time out of your day to listen to some discussion on the crazy state of ballot access laws in the state of Tennessee. To get us started, I'm going to introduce our executive director and chairman of the board, or our president and chairman of the board, Mr. Justin Cornett. How you doing, Jeff?
How you doing, Jeff? I'm hanging in there, man. Busy day, making some meetings, trying to make some friends.
Rock on, man. Rock on. And I'm also going to introduce our guest for the evening, former Wilson County Commissioner and state rep candidate, Miss Heather Scott.
Hi,
Heather.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm great.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you could join us. We had a great event last night. I think all of us were there at the Boom Bars of Bellevue. We were, pretty excited to meet everybody who showed up to learn more about For All. So I appreciate you taking 2 days out of your week to hang out with us, Heather. It means a lot.
Not a problem. We're all in this together.
Absolutely.
That's what I keep hearing.
Yeah. So the way that I wanted to kick this off was introduce you. Not many people, we've been on the page for the last, 3-6 months talking about ourselves, talking about For All. You have a very interesting story. And when we set up our case study for ballot access, we talked to you, we approached you because we feel like your story really exemplifies you've lived it. You've lived the plight of running as a minor party candidate, and you've kind of seen how broken the laws are. So if it's all right with you, Heather, I'll just give you the floor, let you introduce yourself, give us a little bit of a background.
Sure, absolutely. So I grew up in Texas and came to Tennessee in about 1993. My husband was in the music industry and on tour a lot, so I had to find something to do with all my time, and I got involved in politics and just became
Sounds like a mistake right there. Mistake number
exactly.
one.
And that's an interesting lifestyle in itself, being political and having somebody in the music industry. But I became active. I was very involved in a minor party for several. I didn't actually join the minor party until I lived in Tennessee about 3 years, and then decided shortly after about early 2000s, decided to place my name on a ballot for whatever reason for county commissioner. And I can get into more of that later, but
was that a nonpartisan race?
Yes, it was a nonpartisan race. All local elections typically are nonpartisan unless a city or county has taken the time to collect signatures for ballot access. So It was a nonpartisan race, and ran for state representative after 2 terms on the county commission because I have the theory. I think maybe it's Will Rogers, politicians need to be changed often. So I self-limited my term and decided to run for state representative at that time.
Gotcha.
Understood.
So when you were elected county commission, that was a nonpartisan race. So everybody was an independent, basically. Is that right?
They were, except a lot of people knew me as, a libertarian. So whenever I released in my press releases, I made sure that I made mention of that. And then the editor of the local paper was pretty friendly to our cause and would sometimes, list me as a libertarian too.
I got you. And you served 2 terms. Were you, did you have candidates that ran against you, or were you unopposed? Or
the first term I did have a candidate, and his name was removed from the ballot before the election date. So I was the only person on the ballot for my first election. So I was thinking, I'll throw my name in the hat. I'll never win. Surprise.
Right. Yeah. Funny how those things work out.
Yeah. I'm like, what do I do now? But, learned a lot about septic tanks. And so the second term, I must have done a good job because I ran unopposed my second term.
Yeah. Nice. And I assume that you didn't have a bunch of people abstain from voting against you or writing in against you. So you had a fan base in the community.
I did. I had really good relationships with, the local the local Democrats and the local Republicans, because there are issues that we can all work on together.
Absolutely.
What a novel concept that would be.
Yeah, right.
That's actually a great pivot. So that was one of the questions that I was going to ask you tonight was, obviously you're on our advisory committee. You've been on our advisory committee since we basically launched this project. We have a lot of respect for you. But the real question that I have for you is, what brought you to 4L? What about the brand kind of intrigued you? And then we can go back to your story a bit about what it was like to run for state rep coming into it with the ballot access law.
Yeah, absolutely. And really with For All Tennessee, when the two of you talked about, we want to focus on issues, not parties, not personalities, but about the issues, that's just like near and dear to my heart. When I was on the county commission, just when you are a minor party candidate and you're a party of one, you do have to learn to make alliances. So you work with different people on different issues. And, it may be this time I work with you on this issue, but I may be opposed to you on another issue, but that doesn't mean we can't be friends and, have a good, respectful working relationship. And that's how I found that really suited me well. And I think taking it to the next level in the state of Tennessee with what you all are trying to do, I'm just very, very excited about that. Alliances are key. And, people can work together and the best solutions are going to come from us talking to each other instead of the government.
A consensus built in a sense of unity as opposed to, which one's got the bigger base and the bigger pull that way. Because, that's all it is right now. It's a George Washington's farewell address. Now let me warn you in the most solemn manner of the baneful effects of party. If you've never read it, it's about 500 words about why parties are bad for this country. And it reads like it's prophecy right now. And the reality is we were always supposed to be a country that, the people came together around issues. And that would be what drove our country. We've gotten away from that. And we're hoping that other people see it the same way you do, that the focus on issues is a critical thing to do, particularly at this time when we're so divided by party and personality and it's infected everything, the media, sports, movies, everything. Hopefully we can find a way to heal it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the purpose of the project. So, the one thing that it's interesting, Heather, you ran you try to run it, or you are a libertarian philosophically, right? So correct. One thing, the quote that I've heard about libertarians, and I think it's extremely accurate, is libertarians understand the left in the way the right never will, and they understand the right in a way the left never will. You guys, you can really see both sides of the issue. So as a pivot to kind of our next question, when you ran trying to run as libertarian, so when you served 2 terms on the commission and you said, I'm going to step up, I'm going to run for state rep, you had this base. What happened to you when you tried to run as a libertarian?
So just being very involved in the Libertarian Party, I knew about ballot access challenges that in order to have my brand, my label on the ballot, I would have to have so many signatures. And I think at that time, it may have been 5%, it may have been 2.5% of the total number of voters in the last gubernatorial election in order to get on the ballot. So that was just unachievable at that point. I knew, okay, I'm going to have to run as an independent. And I really struggled with that. I actually had Republicans come up to me who would say, why don't you run as a Republican? I'm like, I can't do that. I'm not a Republican. It's not fair to the voters. That was my big thing is you need to be honest with the voters and having the Republican brand. But then being an independent, I struggled with that too, because I'm not an independent. I have a party and the voters have a right to know about that party. Being an independent as a candidate and in a minor party, it's also, okay, I'm being told I'm affiliating as an independent when I actually have a party. And there's also, I call it, it's the stigma of being an independent because,
Right.
People don't put a lot of credibility into that, even if you do have a track record.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it at the very outset, the branding. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, let's be real. There are a lot of people that go into an election booth and pull for the letter next to someone's name as opposed to the name itself. And being denied that letter is 100% intentional, and being labeled an independent, makes everybody wonder if you're just some crazy that's trying to run on the ballot for some weird reason. It is.
It misleads the voters. It causes confusion. It's, you're not an independent. You work with a party. You have a set of values. You have a platform that you believe in.
It's interesting you say about the voter confusion, and you'll probably get into this a little bit later, but one of the things the state election committee, I mean, they're tasked with avoiding voter confusion, and here this is contributing to it almost.
Right.
So.
And if I may, just to clarify for anybody that might be listening, in Tennessee, if you want to run as a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, you need 25 signatures from registered voters inside whatever district you're trying to run in. If you want to run as any other party, Libertarian, Constitution Party, a Green Party, Kanye West Party, it does not matter. You need 56,082 signatures.
2.5%.
Right.
Yeah, 2.5% of the votes cast in the last gubernatorial race. So you can imagine for somebody who wants to run for Senate or for governor, that's excessive. It's extremely excessive. It's 2,000-3,000 times what the other old parties have to collect. It's
more than that.
It's a huge burden, and it costs money, in addition to time and going out and meeting with folks. You may have to hire paid petitioners to go out and do that for you. And that's pretty expensive.
Right. And to give an anecdote toward that end, there was a effort to get a referendum on the ballot in Maine. I think it was this past year. It might have been the year before. But it was the Republicans were trying to get this referendum on the ballot in Maine, and they needed like 53,000 or 50 something thousand signatures to get the referendum on the ballot. They spent over $600,000 and failed to get the number of signatures that they needed.
Wow.
That's an old part. I mean, that's Republican Party who had
all the connections,
infrastructure, and they still failed to achieve it. And it's crazy. If I could just touch on this briefly, if you look at the other states in this country, the average for minor party ballot access is around 10,000. So you go to any other state, you add them up. I mean, there's some that are zero, right? There are some that are very easy.
Right. Florida.
Florida, right. Florida is a great example of a really good state that's a model for this type of legislation. But, so 10,000 signatures is the average, though, if you look across the country. There's only 2 or 3 states that are worse than Tennessee, at least as of 2018. I think those 2 states were California and Texas, if I remember correctly, Justin.
Yeah, as of 2018, we were the 3rd worst. California and Texas, the 2 most populous states, were the only ones that required more signatures. In the 2020 election, there were 2 other states that passed us just barely, and they were Georgia and Ohio. Georgia and Ohio, and they're both within about 5,000 of where we're at. So
yeah. Well, these other states that have, they have higher population totals, right?
Yes.
Consideration at least.
Yes.
So it's
significantly.
We are, if you consider it, per capita, we are way ahead of the rest of the country in a bad way on this issue.
Right.
So Heather, getting back to your story, you ran for state rep. Now you said it was going to be a very expensive process. So you decided to run as an independent, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that race and how that went, what you may have learned? I mean, not just the ballot access laws, but some of the other barriers you may have run into running as an independent?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest barriers, of course, when you're running a race against 2 major party candidates, you have to play in the same sandbox with them. And in order to do that, you do have to raise funds. You have a message. You've got to buy media to get your message out. And that's one of the big things is different groups that you may have aligned with in interest they don't even want to bother talking, donating to a third party candidate or an independent candidate. They're using their funds to back the two major parties. So that was a huge issue, is just the money. The other thing is just being included in some of the debates. I was very fortunate in Wilson County, more so than any other probably third party candidate, because I had been a county commissioner. I was invited to the table, and but I did run later for governor, and no one's included in a debate for governor except for the two major parties. So that's a huge burden. You've got a message, you want to get it out. So
right. And then you add to that the fact that you have Republicans and Democrats basically drawing the districts. So not only are you at a financial disadvantage, you're at a ballot access disadvantage, which is also a financial disadvantage. If you consider how much money it costs to get on the ballot. You're not invited to the debates. And then you've got the opposition drawing the districts.
Right.
So, and don't forget about the media. I mean, the media is less interested in an independent that, again, could just be out for their own, fame or whatever. I ran for governor or whatever, versus, somebody that might represent the third largest party as opposed to the first or the second largest parties. It has a different impact for everybody when that independent word is used versus a party's name is used.
Right. Absolutely. And, just getting back to, to that end with the media, with a minor party or a third party, we can offer different solutions to a problem. I mean, we all want the same things. We all want access to good health care. We all want to educate our children. We want good education for our children. We want to pursue happiness.
Sure.
And, the two major parties, not, to beat a dead horse, but we've tried some solutions and they're not working. And we're just going round and round. So we need some more voices. We need more voices at the table to help solve these problems.
I couldn't agree more. And I mean, it seems like it's the most basic thing in the whole wide world. There are 6.6 million people in the state of Tennessee. Mm-hmm. It is insane to think that everybody's voice can be represented by one of two sides, one of two viewpoints. It's absolutely bonkers to think that that's a real thing.
Well, and there's another. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Heather, go for it.
So no, I was just gonna say, you walk down the cereal aisle and you have a million choices to pick from.
Sure.
But you can only have two parties on your ballot.
Yeah.
We're against socialism, though, everywhere. Right?
Oh, they might. Even they have a voice. So yeah, absolutely.
No,
I'm willing to hear anybody.
They're right a portion of the time too, just like every other side. So, that's another dynamic, and we didn't really have this on the agenda, but I do think it's worth mentioning. Another dynamic with minor parties is kind of the fear or lesser evil voting dynamic, and the reason, from from what I understand, from a political science perspective, that we have this lesser evil assessment that are made by voters at the ballot box is because we have a first past the post plurality takes all system. So, we want to work on ballot access reform, but another issue that we care about and that our members care about is ranked choice voting. Because if you're not familiar with ranked choice voting, it basically allows you to have an instant runoff. For the listeners chiming in, it basically allows you to rank your votes. So you could say, listen, I really like Heather. Heather is the best choice for state rep, but I don't want to split the vote and have a Democrat get in there. So I'm going to put the Republican as my second choice. So if Heather doesn't get 51% of the vote, the Republican would be your next option. Mm-hmm. So, did you have any experience trying to get past that lesser evil? We like ranked choice voting. We'd love to see a statewide bill. We're talking to our members about that now. But, what did you say when somebody came to you with, well, I'd love to vote for you, Heather, but I can't let Joe Schmo Democrat get in there.
Right.
So you have a response for that?
Vice versa.
Yeah. And, to me, I'm like, well, I respect your decision, but, look and see where we are. We're on wash, rinse, repeat. And definition of insanity, all the cliches. But I think every election, I think people are beginning to understand now more and more about, I choosing the lesser of two evils is still evil. So you hear all the time, we've got to have a third party. We've got to have a third party. And every third party candidate, you know, Constitution Party, Green Party, Libertarian Party, we're all like, we're here, you know, we're here for you. And people are excited. I mean, in doing ballot access, going out and getting signatures, when you talk to people, they're like, yes, I will sign your ballot. I may not vote for you. And I'm like, you know, it doesn't mean you have to vote for us, but they want more choices.
Right.
They, you know, it just.
Yeah. I think it's really, I think it'd be really rare to run into somebody that was like, no, we just have to have it down to these two parties because that's what's best for the world. I'm sure those people are out there, but I feel like they might represent 5 or 10% of the population. I think most everyone agrees that their ideas are not represented in any sense of a real way by the two major parties. Some, sure, there's definitely a base, but there's a lot of people out there that they call the swing vote that is not so tied and anchored to other people's ideologies because they think for themselves.
The majority voting bloc in the country is independent.
Yep.
And it's getting bigger
Absolutely.
and bigger and bigger every year because more people are coming to understand that. The best candidates often, you know, don't run under the old party ballots because they're independent. They want to think for themselves. They want to actually do what legislators are meant to do, which is represent their constituents in spite of what their party tells them to do, in spite of what some moneyed interest might make them do. And Heather, I think you're an example of that. Obviously, your campaign for governor was awesome. I actually voted for you in 2018.
Well, thank you.
But I don't know if you have anything.
You had several good choices there.
Yeah, there were a lot of candidates on the ballot in 2018. That's for sure. So I did want to ask you, you know, I don't know if you have any other things you wanted to add as it pertains to wrapping up your experience as a minor party candidate. We wanted to talk a bit about the reform that we were working on this year and maybe pick your brain on it. But before I do that, was there any other lessons learned or any other commentary you want to add on this?
You know, I think we've hit it all, but, you know, the biggest thing, it would be nice, absolutely, to have ballot access just because it you know, just gives credibility to a candidate.
Understood. Well, that's a great pivot. You know, I'll give the floor to Cornett because, you know, many of the people that are watching the stream probably are well aware of the work that we did last year, or rather the beginning of this year in the legislature to try to fix our broken ballot access laws, that 56,000 signatures compared to the 25 for the Republicans and Democrats. So, Justin, I'll let you kind of take the floor and tell everybody what happened.
Yeah, that was an interesting day. Long story short, we had the votes, but it was a voice vote. And for whatever reason, whether the chairman heard the call incorrectly or what, he thought the nays had it, and that's the way he called it. And our bill died at that moment, despite
talk about
having those votes.
Yeah, talk about the bill, though. So what did we try to reform? I mean, that's, I think, an interesting point, specifically the letter of the law there.
Fair enough. I'm sorry. I wasn't following you there, Josh. So, yeah, like you said, the law currently, Democrat, Republican, Independent needs 25 signatures. Everybody else needs 56,082. The bill that we had would have reduced the number. There's a formula that exists inside the code, and all we did was tweak the numbers inside that code. So instead of 2.5% of the governor's race, total votes cast in the governor's race, which is how you get to that 56,000 number, it would drop it to 0.5%, which would put us in the neighborhood of 12,000 signatures. Still a whole lot more signatures than Democrats or Republicans or independents need, but it's something that might be attainable for a third party to get, or anybody that would like to challenge some local group. I mean, there's lots of instances where good old boy networks and from one party or another have dominated politics for such a period of time that there is no recourse because those are the two parties. But I digress. So it would reduce the number of signatures, like I say. It also addresses retention. So currently you go out and you collect the signatures. and then you have to run a candidate immediately. If that candidate in a statewide race, governor, senate, or president, if that candidate does not pull 5% of the vote, you're back to square one and you have to go and collect the signatures all over again. If it does collect 5%, you are labeled a statewide party. You have to form a state election commission, and you have to have primaries that cost taxpayers dollars, all those fun things. So we address the retention by bringing that down to 1%. And we address the primary bit by making the threshold for the primaries to kick in at 25%. So you wouldn't be considered a statewide party and be required to form a state election commission or a committee or have primaries until you got 25%. So there would be no additional cost to taxpayers on that bill.
Gotcha. So obviously this bill was, I think, a great bill, right? Because it brings us in line with the rest of the country. There's a lot more to be done. I mean, we could talk about trying to get Tennessee to Florida's model where everyone has equal access. The Tennessee Constitution calls for free and equal access, right? I mean, it's kind of a mandate, and we believe we're in violation of that. So we brought this bill, HB 409, and I think the primary sponsor was Representative Buttle in the House. Oh, 609, sorry. Mixing it up with a civil forfeiture bill.
Civil forfeiture.
Yeah, so we had Bud Holsey in the House bringing this bill, Mark Pody in the Senate. So obviously, Justin, I know you worked very hard to get this bill introduced, very hard to get sponsors. So you brought this bill into committee. Can you tell the people what happened there? Just a little bit.
Well, like you say, you heard what the outcome was. We had the votes. We confirmed that we had the votes the day of. It was an 8-person subcommittee. We had 5 yes votes. One of those votes had left the room when the vote was called, so we had a 4-3 majority, and they confirmed the day of to me and later through constituent emails that they did in fact vote in favor of our bill. So it's fact that we had 4 yes votes and 3 no votes, and it was called for the nays. To me, the real telling thing though was during the committee hearing when one of the representatives expressed his dissent to the bill and reasoning for the dissent. And paraphrasing, sorry, there's a fly. I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said that he didn't think we should pass this bill because people might vote for these other parties, and that would take votes away from my party and your party, as he spoke to the sponsor of the bill. That is the only reason you can oppose this, is if you think that there are 2 parties and everybody's represented by those 2 parties, and those are the only 2 parties that matter, and those are the only 2 parties that should exist. That is literally the only reason you can oppose this bill. But they found a way to do it, and hopefully we'll be able to bring it back next year, and they'll understand that people don't agree that those should be the only 2 parties and no other 2 parties should be allowed. Yeah.
So, I think most lawmakers are kind of hesitant to be on the wrong side of this issue. I mean, it's such a common sense reform to go back and say, no, I think it should be 56,000 versus 25. That's a hard sell. It kind of makes you look a little
protective of your own power. Right. It looks like you're protecting your own power because that's what you're literally doing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, there's no way to spin that. It's the fact.
Yeah, and for our listeners, I did post a link to the article. So if you want to read a little bit more about what happened to HB 609 in committee, the article's there, the chat. Todd McKinley says, "You got messed over," is what his response was. I think that really was the consensus. It just wasn't a really good call. So
yeah, I mean, and everybody seemed to agree that we did get messed over. I mean, we had people pick up on that were as the Tennessee holler on one side and Tennessee stands on the other side, both picking up and pointing out how that was not how that should have went down. But again, we'll bring it back next year. We'll have a lot more ammunition. Hopefully we can get you to run for state rep again with your party moniker, Heather.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might just do that now that I'm living here now in Shelbyville, and we've got tax issue, a property tax issue that's pretty controversial here. So I am getting to make friends. I am making friends all over the place right now.
Yes, that's always a good thing. Yeah, you can be a trendsetter.
Absolutely. We did actually get a question. I was going to pick Heather's brain and Justin's brain on this one from Todd. I'll put it up on the screen. This is Todd from Facebook asked, what are your thoughts on the Republican State Executive Committee proposing a fee to run as a Republican? I don't know if you two have any thoughts.
I'll let Heather go first in case she says what I was already thinking.
Yeah, I'm like, it's their party, their rules.
That's exactly
and if they want to play that way, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. So,
but I do support. I could. That is exactly what I was going to say. I had a feeling it was going to be what you were going to say,
Great
and
minds.
I will only add to it if only there were other options out there where people could run under different party monikers that gave them a choice as to whether or not they wanted to pay that $500 and still gave them the opportunity to get elected.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The libertarians wouldn't charge, I don't think. So yeah, there you go.
No, I mean the only downside is that these major parties are taking taxpayer funded funding for their primaries and for their operations to some degree. Mm-hmm. If that could change, we would be in a better place with these private institutions running their own parties, making their own rules, and everyone allowed to create and be involved in that.
If we could move toward a caucus system, that would be incredibly helpful and serve the exact same purpose. I don't think that there's any problem with the Republicans being exclusive and having Republicans elect their candidates and vice versa for the Democrats. It's their organization. What I do think is not okay, or what I think is not okay, is them setting bars that make it exclusionary for other people to participate in the same game. No, I mean, it's their party and they can run it the way that they want to, is the way that I would have to answer Mr. McKinley's question.
Right.
But generally, I think it's probably a bad idea, but it's their call.
They might get into an issue of, somebody could bring up, it's a poll tax, somehow wrangle that in. But, absolutely. Their rules, they can play them how they want.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully that answers your question, Todd. All right. So we'll move to the last item of the agenda. But I want to preface it before we do that by kind of giving our listeners a summary on how we operate. So in case you haven't looked at our website or you're new to our organization, For All is basically a democratized 501c4. And what that means is, we don't have big donors at the top pushing their agenda. We don't have, a bias or an idea that we're trying to shove something down the throat of our members. Basically, the way it works is we're a bottom-up organization. So our members vote to authorize all the work that we do, and our members are basically the citizen lobbyists on the ground. They're driving our operations. They're the core, the lifeblood of the organization. So what that means is going into 2022, and when we choose our legislative agenda, we'll be going to our members. We'll be asking them, what issues do you care about? What issues do you want to see work? Now, obviously, it's got to be within.
And have you vote on it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and they will vote on it to authorize it. But obviously, we have members of like Heather, who we believe are very aligned with our mission statement, that are on the advisory committee, basically, kind of serving as a check step to make sure that we don't have our membership authorize legislation that's outside of our mission statement. And that's kind of the role that Heather serves on the committee, and many of the other people who are from a variety of different political backgrounds. But the reason I bring this up is because as we go to 2022, we're polling, we're talking to people about issues they care about. So I would like to talk to you, Heather, just about issues that you're passionate about. You talked about this tax issue. I'd love to give you the floor to talk about that briefly. And what issues would you like to see us work in 2020?
Sure. Definitely, as I was talking to someone else here in the state, we talk about qualified immunity, but for police officers, but really any government actor shouldn't be protected. So getting rid of qualified immunity or sovereign immunity, a big one near and dear to me, and especially with a lot of people with this pandemic, and they're talking about the job hopping that's going to happen here real soon. A lot of people may have think, hey, it's time for me to be my own boss. Well, let's look at the challenges of starting your own business.
Right.
You've got, local taxes. You've got a franchise tax. Even if you're an online business, you've got to pay this franchise fee every year. I'm also an attorney, so I have to pay a privilege tax every year. And I know the Tennessee Bar Association was working to actually get that fee reduced and phase it out, so to speak. There's 7 professions here in Tennessee that do have to pay. It's an income tax. Oh, it's a privilege for me to work here. Attorneys give a lot of pro bono time, and I'm sure doctors give time, treat patients for free. A big one for me is, I would love to see marijuana, recreational marijuana, but, it's baby steps sometimes. Getting people there. Let's start out with medical. I know Mississippi just passed that. Yeah. And the food tax. We still have a food tax here in Tennessee I'm like, what's that? When I moved here from Texas, I'm like, you're making me pay a tax on food. So, and then another one, when I was on the county commission, the Kelo decision had come down about eminent domain with, how they have, finagled in their ways to create that a truly private function, a private benefit. They're saying that that's public. So in Wilson County, right after that happened, I made sure that, hey, if you're going to call eminent domain here in, Wilson County, it's going to be truly for a public purpose. But I think that we need to start worrying about that a little bit more. And just because that definition of public is becoming broader and broader and broader, and we need to reel it in. Right. Property rights are key here in our country. Yep.
Agreed. Yeah, foundational, and they affect everybody in every community. One of the bills that we ran this year, it was around blighted properties, and in Tennessee, I was personally shocked to learn, thanks to David Seal, chairman of the Republican Party in Jefferson County. He informed me that blight is defined by area in this state. Which means if you live in a neighborhood that's got 50 houses in it and one property is run down and it should not be lived in and is ruled a blighted property, that they can use eminent domain to take the entire neighborhood. So we had a bill that would limit that just to the one blighted property, because that affects a lot of people, and a lot of times these are poorer neighborhoods that are being affected by this, because the goal is obviously to get property tax dollars out of these properties, and the more property tax dollars they can get, the better. So, that's the logic behind it. If they can get more money out of it, they take it and they sell it to somebody that's going to give them more tax dollars out of it.
Absolutely.
But some of those houses might be handed down for 100 years, and that's some of those situations could start. Having a house handed to you, regardless of the state, if it was built up and fixed up, and the neighborhood comes back, and all those different things, it could be the foundation of generational wealth for a family that didn't have it. It's property rights issues. They get mixed up as a right only kind of extreme right kind of only issue, but it's definitely about a lot more than that. It affects a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. And that's not to talk about Shelbyville, but that's one of the issues about they're trying to justify this extremely high property tax that they want to pass to help with blight. And to me, it's like, let's help somebody up. If somebody's got a problem with their property, as a community, hey, we can do GoFundMe. You don't have to wipe out their property. That, like you said, that may be the only property they have, and they're just not in a financial situation to move any to get anywhere else or sell it. So we need to look at alternative solutions. But yes, and restrict
wouldn't it be something if we could get some of these companies that have gigantic no bid contracts from the government to also give back to the communities by going out and releveling broken foundations, and for some 85-year-old lady who lives in this house, but has children that she's going to pass it on to. You know, I don't know. We could do so much more with our world and so much more good in this world if we just thought about what was important for like 2 seconds.
Absolutely. And that's where we need more, more voices at the table, with getting back to ballot access. So bring it all around.
Well
full
said,
circle.
full circle. Yeah, I love it. Absolutely full circle.
Throw out that lasso.
Yeah. In order to fix this problem, we have to have more voices. And the only way we could do that is if they actually have the ability to have their voices heard, get on the ballot, and actually get elected. So I'm excited.
While I agree with you guys on the more voices thing, I don't think that's the way that I would look at it. But what we need is to find ways to unify around important things, and that can happen in a number of different ways. It can happen in a number of different communities in a number of different ways. And I think that having more choices on the ballot would be one of those. But, I think that For All offers another alternative to that, because we don't care about the party politics side of it. We just would like to have enough people in this state to believe in this idea that we could kind of force the hand of the legislature to some extent and be like, this is what your district says, because we talk to them and they talk back to us because they want it. They have a vested interest in this policy. You know what I mean? So I think it's a all-pronged approach. And I think that more choices on the ballot is a part of that approach for sure. But unity is the overall thing. We've got to find ways to stop hating each other and work out differences.
Absolutely. I'm tired of fighting on Facebook.
I mean, it can be entertaining at times. I get it, but I try not to.
No, we have so much more power collectively as a people to get and to help each other.
Right. It's amazing what we can do for ourselves when we do something good for somebody beside us first.
Absolutely.
It just makes everything better.
Yeah. Well, with that said, I think we're about at time, so I'll start wrapping us up. I don't know if you guys have any other comments you want to make. I do want to point out a comment from Todd McKinley to follow up on what we talked about earlier. He was just kind of wrapping up the narrative we were talking about with the taxpayer-funded primaries. His problem was kind of what you were saying with the poll tax. They get paid for the taxpayer money to run their primaries, and then they charge as well. So I thought that was a good comment by Todd. I'd feature that real quick. But Heather, I don't know, Heather, Justin, do you guys have anything you want to say to wrap us up before I take us out for the evening?
No,
I just want to say,
you go first.
I was just going to say that we need more Heathers in the world.
Agreed.
We need people out there that, see it and identify a problem and go and find ways to fix it. I mean, the property tax thing you're talking about right now, you're working that on your own volition, as I understand it, correct?
Absolutely. And I found some people, I found some friends finally. So I'm going to go, litter my neighborhood with flyers tomorrow. But I absolutely appreciate what you are doing. I mean, I truly believe, and let's, work on issues. Let's work together if we can't, and, have a big group of people. When you talk about your super majority, hey, if 75% to 80% of the people don't agree with something, it's probably bad legislation and shouldn't be enacted anyway.
Right. Right. We just got to get the word out there. We just got to get the word out there.
Yep. Thank you again for joining, Heather. It really does mean a lot. It really does. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's always good to talk to you, Heather.
All right. Good talking to y'all.
Yeah. So I'll wrap us up real quick. If you're interested in learning more about For All, go to foralltn.org. You can become a member and vote on our yearly legislative agenda there. Just go to foralltn.org/membership or hit the membership tab at the top right. Thank you for listening in. If you have any questions for us, feel free to email us at info@foralltn.org or shoot us a comment or a Facebook message. Thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful night.